What's up, summoners? King Player here. Today, we're going to be doing an RTA tier list before Season 3. So, hopefully, after this tier list from the preseason going to Season 3, you get a better idea on what's good, what's changed, and can start thinking of teams and units you want to build, as I'll be discussing all of them. Now, before you start clamoring and asking, where's the tier list, King? I want to see the tier list. Do want to put some disclaimers. I will be going from the list from top to bottom, so going over the good units first, and then the units that aren't as great later on, and explaining a lot of things at the beginning. So make sure you at least watch the first 3 minutes before you start angrily typing on the comments, why is my boy Haste all the way on the fun and not a meta unit, right? So make sure you know that. Also, do know that this tier list is completely opinion based, both in my experience in the preseason as well as season 2 and just everything from that I've seen from different players. And I have asked other players to give their opinions on some of the things in the list. And while there's some things we didn't agree on, it overall we could agree on at least the top portion of the list. But with that disclaimer out the way, here's the tier list. So I know you guys are gonna be like, "Where's my guys? Where's my boy? Where's this unit? Where's that unit?" So I'm just gonna slowly scroll through, and you guys can take your pictures, stop the video. So let me just do this portion first, and then I'll do the bottom portion of the list. And all units should be in here, including Mortal X. So if I miss one, let me know in the comments. I don't think I did because this is it's a pretty holistic list. So I'll leave that there, and then the last snippet. And all right, now let's break down the tier list, right? So what does this tier mean? So highly contested are units that you're going to be seeing in almost every single of your games, and that if you're trying to use that unit, you want to get them as soon as possible, or they may be picked away from you. For the meta units, this doesn't mean that meta units are weaker than highly contested units. It just means that the highly contested units are typically first to first and second. Meta units and highly contested do not have a strength difference. Uh, Ross is not necessarily better than a Tywin, right? There are some scenarios that one is better than the other, but overall, these are units that you're going to be seeing competing very, very often. For the top picks, these are units that are still extremely powerful in the current meta and can still round out a lot of different teams. But for the most part, meta units do have more gameplay and see more prevalence in the game. Still really, really powerful, and I do use a lot of the units in here. Counter picks, these typically are going to be your fourth and fifth pick. Very situational, but very powerful at what they do. You do want to pick them up in certain scenarios where you may want to use that unit, and they can do really good in that scenario. A little bit different from niche, as we'll go in a second. Strong picks, not as strong as top picks and don't see as much play as the other ones, but still do some things very, very well and are still strong units. It's just a lot of the time people prefer to try something different or may not have enough Malagora or may not have the gear to make these units work. So that is going to be as far as the strong picks. And then last, for the last couple of tiers, these are going to be the niche, the outclassed, and the fun should not use. So for the niche, it's just you need very specific setups and you need to be going against a very specific team for these units to shine. They need a whole team built around them that in RTA, it's not usually realistic, or they need conditions that you need very specific things to occur, because usually there's a unit that's better than them, but they do better in certain scenarios. You're like, oh yeah, this unit definitely does better in this scenario than this unit. So that's why they fall into this niche category where it's like they still can be used and you can still see a lot of success with them, such as unit like Charles, right? There's definitely times where Charles is not that bad, or even Shooting Star Katie's where you can definitely make her work, or even things like Tempest Surin that have an imprint and can do a lot of work. So again, not saying these units are bad, they're still strong, but they require a lot more setup than your other units. Outclass just basically means that there is another unit that just strictly does the job better than this unit, and I don't see any scenario where you would draft them over any other unit in that we've discussed up to this point, right? It's just, why would you draft this unit when you can draft X unit? Now, does this mean that they're unusable? No. And one of the ones that I already know people are going to ask me about is going to be Pavel. Pavel is still a pretty strong cleave and does have a niche and could potentially go into niche, but the amount of gear requirement and the setup and the odds of you actually using them are very, very low versus any other cleaver like T Surin. But definitely could go up theoretically. But the reason why it's like, why use him? Why invest the gear unless you really like them? So still can work and can still do things. It's just the gear requirements are insane and it's just harder than a niche because it's like very few scenarios will use them. And then fun should not use. I mean, if you're trying to have fun in RTA, which at the end of the day, that's what a lot of people want to do, this is your place to go to. A lot of non-specialty changed heroes, a lot of 3 stars, a lot of 5 stars that just really don't do anything. that pretty much are gonna lose you the game if you pick them. But you can also have fun team comps and catch some people off guard. Like Jurado can definitely mess up some people, right? There's definitely some situations where Jurado can shine and can win a game. But for the most part, you're not really gonna be picking him, right? His base stats are too low, the team composition required is too high, and there are just better options that are also some free to play options, right? So not the greatest, but can still be used. So that's a fun should not use if you're trying to be competitive, unless you have a crazy carrot or a crazy Jurado or crazy Leo that you can make work. And I know people in the comments are gonna have a lot of discussion on that one, so I'll make sure to read all of them. All right, now on to going from the top to the bottom. So first with the highly contested. So the highly contested, as I mentioned, very high contestant. Ross, insane unit, free to play. You should build him right now. If you haven't built him, I don't know why you haven't. You're missing one of the best units in the game, one of the best knights. If you're struggling against Cleave, if you're struggling against tank teams, and you don't have your Ross, I don't know what to tell you because you should have a Ross. His S2 being able to dual attack with the highest attack unit and being able to soul burn it is just insane. The S3 giving defense buff and healing him, making him a solid tank, and the S1 being able to strip and give him combat readiness. It's just the amount of things he does is insane. The S2 can outright win you games, and he gives immunity too. So it's like if you hate immunity set like I do, build a fast Ross. Your attacker, like your Spectres Genebria, can get immunity off of him, and you can give him Bastion of Pelusia. There's so many things you can do with Ross that I really don't see a reason for you not to have built him. He's amazing. He just does too much. And if paired with a damage dealer, Ross kind of becomes a damage dealer himself because of that S2 being on such low cooldown. Cerise, pretty bonkers, really good counter to control to cleave, a control unit, and also a cleave setup unit. In cleave, she's amazing if you're able to set up into CDOM. Against cleave, she's amazing because she has a high base speed. In control, she can just control the enemy with S2. In a tank team, she dual attacks. In an aggressive team, she dual attacks, controls, stuns, slows. She just does so much that people are using her more and more and more and more. And once she gets a rerun, I expect her to almost be everywhere. Fallen Cecilia is still the best defensive unit in the game, as she does a lot, right? She's able to give Barry at the start of the battle, prevent you from getting cleaved if they don't ban her, right? They're most likely going to ban her. She gets an S3 that applies skill nullifier, making it extremely hard for the opponent to kill you right away. She provokes, and with the new frenzy changes, can provoke units very easily, right? So just insane unit, one of the best defensive units. Lets you play around with T-Cern, lets you play around with Spectre Tenebria more, lets you play around with Akali, lets you play around with all these stealth units, and with like new guiding light buffs. Fallen Cecilia with Landy is just disgusting, right? So just still one of the best defensive options. That's all there is to it. She's still the best defensive option. F Faithless Lyrica, she is the core to cleave. If you don't pick her and they do, you're not going to be able to cleave as well. If you're playing a more aggressive cleave comp, you're going to need her. So that's one of the reasons she's up here. She could go down to meta, but cleave is actually very popular. Spectre Tenebria, she's just the best damage dealer in the game right now. She's able to hit 2 targets with the S1 when the S3 is on cooldown, can soul burn to be able to kill single target units very effectively, and give your other units book because she's a mage, she's able to carry book. And the fact that she's stealth it forces your opponent to bring AoE, forcing them into a certain draft, so people will first pick Stene if they're not second picking her because it forces AoE, which puts your opponent in a position where they have to either give answers or ban. And if they are not able to, and you just win. And if they do, you have 4 picks to be able to deal with it. So really oppressive damage dealer, does insane amount of stuff, and forces your opponent into situations that aren't that great. Last Ride Across, still one of the best units in this game. If anyone's ever told you Last Ride Across is not broken, you are being lied to. The S3 still does insane amount of damage. The immunity is better than ever because with the new RTA frenzy changes, effect resistance doesn't really do much, but immunity is still a really solid way to stop that early control that control teams can apply. So very solid kid. Counters AoE, can cleave, can bruiser cleave, can bruiser, can tank, does everything. He is a little bit weaker than he was last season, just because he doesn't ramp up as fast, but that early game presence is still there, that counter to AoE is still there, still an amazing pick, still super broken. F3, one of the best 3-stars, again, like Ross, free to play, why haven't you built her? Being able to lock down an opponent unit early on is just absolutely insane, and being able to follow up with another fast damage dealer and just go 2 for 1, and then you basically kill a unit, and it's a 3v4, right? So she can create those scenarios that are 3v4 or lock down priority units. People are running 280 speed plus Falcon Clarius right now to even counter cleave and to speed RNG cleave. And just being able to lock out a unit at the beginning of the game is just so powerful because games are decided very quickly. She's still one of the best 3 stars in the game, is able to tank bust because she has self-sustain, can break barriers, can lock down opponent, and can decrease defense. Just an amazing unit all the way across. Ambitious Tywin, he's absolutely bonkers. He's easily one of the best control units in the game. Also, one of the best anti-control units in the game because he's able to cleanse with the S2 AoE, provoke on the S1 with the new Frenzy changes. You're going to be provoking any unit in the game after Frenzy 3. S3 having the ability to stun and slow down everyone and then soul burning it to have that every single turn. You're stunning and slowing every single, like, it's just disgusting. And if you give him a little bit of attack like I do, he can even beat your soul DPS because you're able to lock down and just do so much freaking damage. It's just ridiculous. Tamara Luluka has proven to be really bonkers and really really strong. Whether you put her in a cleave team to give you the opportunity to not be scared if they ban your CDOM, or if you decide to go with a more aggressive speed comp, she's gonna be your girl. Being able to push your team by 15% is invaluable in cleave teams, and even in non-cleave teams, her ability to have stealth the first 2 turns allows her to survive and do enough single target damage to take away an enemy's unit. So in hyper aggressive team, the fact that she has pretty good base speed and you can build her 250 can take away turn 1, which is so critical in this new meta. Turn 1 is everything, right? This meta is all about turn 1. And if you're able to take away that turn 1, you are most likely going to win the game. And it's just a massive presence that they have to deal with. So an amazing opener, amazing cleave unit, amazing for everything. Arbiter Vildred, he continues to thrive, whether it's still the damage build and he outspeeds the Tamara Luke and Emo Haze, or the counter tank build that a lot more people have been playing with. You can't kill him. He kills you and you lose the game, right? So very simple. He kills people. And the glancing hit on the S3 is still one of the most ridiculous thing in this game. I do not understand why his S3 even has a glancing hit. Little Queen Charlotte, one of the units that got buffed. Amazing unit right now. With Fawn Cecilia still being one of the best defensive units, Little Queen Charlotte provides a solid counter to Fawn Cecilia and to Fawn Cecilia teams. Also, just overall does insane single target damage. And also brings an Adamant Shield, allowing you to bring an extra damage dealer while still keeping your team relatively tanky since she has that built-in Adamant Shield passive. She's a menace. If they bring Dark, you're most likely killing that Dark unit and doing some really good splash damage. And the S1 does bonkers amount of damage. So you're able to soul burn and essentially take out any unit in the game with S3, S1. Really, really solid. I really want a Little Queen Charlotte right now. Ravi, she's a queen. She's a soloist. She does extremely great. One of the reasons why tank teams aren't doing as hot is because tank teams are not able to deal with a good Ravi. Tank teams will lose to a good Ravi pretty consistently, and she's just able to bruise her out and output so much damage. The S1 stun is just ridiculous. And if she gets to Frenzy with her passive and the attack buff and the effectiveness increase, it's over for them. You get an S3 off, you're most likely winning that game. Absolutely bonkers unit. So powerful. Probably one of the best bruisers. I would argue almost the best, but Little Queen Charlotte is pretty up there. Rylet, still really, really annoying. He is a little bit more RNG than these other units, but it doesn't even matter because at the end of the day, she's doing so much single target damage, and the lifesteal build is actually becoming a really popular. So whether you go speed build and you snipe a unit like top model Luluka, you're still able to apply the lifesteal build and let him survive longer and tank your teams, allowing him to scale with Frenzy and then kill an opponent outright. Still has a bit of RNG, but still an amazing single target damage dealer. The miss chance is just so toxic, and he can solo teams, and the speed Rylet, just so much aggression when paired with Tamaru Luka. Tamaru Luka with Rylet is absolutely disgusting. It will kill any unit in this game, even without decreased defense. So powerful, and kind of the core to a lot of aggressive teams right now. Emo Haste, still a really good counter to RB, still really, really annoying unit because he's a Soul Weaver. He's able to put Idol's Cheer and push up your highest attack unit. He still dunks for a ton of damage, hard to kill, can kill squishies, and does really well against tanks, and has damage mitigation. Still the whole package, still an amazing unit, not just an RB counter, which a lot of people seem to think he is. Seaside Bellona, actually a lot scarier, and it's just Seaside Bellona. If they don't have an answer to her, she's gonna win the fight. She outputs so much AoE that if they don't have a Last Rider Craw or Rowana, you're most likely gonna win the fight if they're not able to kill her outright. New Frenzy has made her effectiveness better and the attack scale better with Rengar. She still does so much freaking damage. If they don't have answers to her, she's still probably winning you the game. Still an amazing unit for PvP. Sage Ball, one of my favorites, and someone that will be getting a mini guy later this week. His ability of the S2 to sleep the whole team is just absolutely crushing, and the ability to lap the opponent as well is such a good counter to cleave. So he's able to counter cleave teams easily. He's able to sleep those cleave teams and just win the fight outright. The new S3 buffs have also made him a really good bruiser because if they try to focus him down, they might be losing a unit and you might just be healing back to full health and then they just lose the game, right? So it's a unit you want to kill early because he applies so much control with the S1 and S2. But if you're unsuccessful in killing him, he can kill you with the S3, heal back to full, and you lose the game. Absolutely bonkers unit. It's very dominant when he's in the field. Every time I play with him, I'm like, dude, this unit's insane. I dropped him every single time I can, even if they have anti-control. I don't care. S2 will probably hit them, and then I just win the game, right? So if I hit S2, I just win the game. Lilius becoming one of the best knights, honestly, just still so insane. The S1 dual attack with aggro comps is amazing. The S3 doing damage based on your highest damage unit allows her to do a tank cleave very effectively. The S2 is very, very good, and she is Falconeer Clary's best counter that we know of right now. And Falconeer Clary is so prevalent. Having a Lilius there, really, really good at shutting down that Clary. But just the S1 dual attack is so good, and she's so tanky. And the S3 being able to cleanse also provides some support against control. But the big thing is going to be that S1 dual attack with the high damage DPS units that you're doing. Craw, again, still an amazing unit. He puts so much pressure on the opponent that, hey, I'm going 1-for-1. If you're not able to lock down my Craw and you're not able to kill him, you're losing a unit. And he's hard to kill, and they may not be able to do it properly, and then they just lose their damage dealer, and they're just done for the rest of the game, right? Still amazing, really good tanking, defense buff OP, just does so much, and the provoke has gotten so much better with the new frenzy changes. So a really, really good late game tank because of the S3, even though he did lose damage, the provoke is there to be really, really annoying, and the S2 being really good. Landy, another addition to the squad. Good for Cleve because she gets speed buff and CR boost. Dude, people underestimate the speed buff and CR boost. Just because of the CR push and the speed buff, that's GG. Like that alone is enough to win you fights. And Sesu uses it a lot, and he's one of the number 3, I think right now. And it's just so oppressive if she's able to get turn 1. Especially when she's on Guiding Light with the Fallen Cecilia. You're not touching the Landy, and she's able to cycle with speed buff and the CR push that you get so many turns against the opponent is not going to be able to respond to that. If he gets an S3 off with the Landy, or the opponent gets an S3 off with the Landy, he gets a CR push as speed before the whole team, allowing him to lap him, does a ton of damage, allows her to get to her S3 again faster, and with Guiding Light, you're not touching her. So you're just going to lose the game if you have buffs. One of the reasons tanks aren't doing as hot right now. Basar still a bonkers unit against stall teams. Just being able to soul burn and strip, it's invaluable. Sidam, core to so many cleave teams, and I think right now the most important piece of a cleave team. If you go against a cleave player and you know they're a cleave player and you ban their Sidam, you're most likely winning because Cerise won't be able to set up as easily, Athletica won't be able to set up as easily. It's just amazing cleave unit, is able to push up and one shot, just insane. Tempest Surin, one of the best units right now. She's just so good. She pairs up amazing with Elcraw, amazing with Fallen Cecilia, amazing in cleave, amazing in anti-cleave, amazing in anti-control. She just does everything while doing damage. And it's so hard to deal with the good T Surin, and with the new frenzy changes, if she's on lifesteal, your damage is going up, your health pool is going down, letting you more easily heal back up to full and not die, right? So just absolutely insane unit, especially when anti-control and just cleaving. The fact that she can't be one-shot just makes her that much more valuable. Oxlots is still Oxlots, is still really, really good. If they're able to get Cerise, Oxlots, and Sedum, it's one of the nastiest cleave teams that are out there. And there are a lot of cleave teams as of right now. Cleave is looking really, really strong this season. So it's Cleave really, because Cleave is looking so strong, Oxlots becomes a really, really strong pick. Now, as far as the top picks that I know are going to be really, really good, so let me just make sure that I don't need to speed up. Okay, so we're on schedule so far. So as far as top picks, these are still units that are extremely powerful, and I still recommend you pick. So first, Diani, y'all, the S3 with the attack buff is just nuts. It's still 3-turn attack buff is amazing, and people are opting to build Diani faster to be a speed buffer. So that's what her role has become, is a support that is able to apply attack buff very early. Her pair with Landy is everyone's worst nightmare. If you're able to get these two together, and as well as a Ross, you're in really good shape. Because Diani can set up those defensive buffs with the anti-crit and the attack buff to be able to do more damage. And even if she's just with the Stene, it's just disgusting. Or even with Ravi. I find myself, every time I use Diani, I feel in a really good position. You just have to watch out to make sure that they can't pick Landy. So you either have an answer to her, or you'll be ready to ban that Landy, or you pick her for yourself. Because she does counter Diani pretty bad. But Diani really, really strong. Speedball being really, really good. Dizzy, still an amazing unit. Again, if they don't have any immunity, they're losing the game. Dizzy's S3 is just still absolutely insane. And Speed Dizzy with Lela Violin lets you catch a lot of people off guard, more aggressive comps off guard, and just absolutely destroy it. You do have to be careful of Air Crawl. But without Air Crawl there, she's just usually a really strong unit. She just does so much, and the debuffs are so crushing. Rose. Honestly, I want to put Rose up here. To be completely honest with you guys, I think she actually deserves to go up to the meta. She is amazing. The attack buff, the CR push, and the tankiness. She just does everything. She CR pushes, she tanks, and she just destroys everything. Just a solid unit overall. Super powerful in aggressive comps. Super powerful in even in like Bruiser cleaves. Just a really good unit. Very hard to build though. So just know if you're able to build her, it's really crushing because if they pick her, you have to have an answer to her or you're losing turn one, and which means you usually lose. Alencia, still such a good unit. Ravi has shut her out a lot, and we are not seeing as much Ravi. And that's one of the no, we're not seeing as much Alencia because of the existence of Ravi, but she's still a really strong unit. Able to strip, able to do high damage, able to bruise her out. Still a really, really good unit. Champ C, so you may be wondering, why is Champ C here instead of a counter pick? It comes to a point where if everything has a debuff, is he really just a counter pick? With how aggressive everything is and how many debuffs there are floating around, Champ C has become a top pick. Yes, kind of in the slot of a counter pick. Could go down to counter pick, but he's just absolutely insane with Lela Violin or Abyssal Crown, and just a really big nightmare for a lot of people because, again, a lot of units have debuffs. Cerise, Tisurin, even units like F. Clarice, he's had Bellona, Sage Ball, A. Tywin. A lot of units in the meta right now have debuffs, making him just a really solid pick. A. Ravi, one of the best boosters, has the best revive in the game. The S3 is still the best revive. The S1 does a ton of damage, and she's tanky. Extremely hard to build, and I really want to start using mine more often, but a very solid pick if you're able to use it properly. Watch Ashuri, the best speed contester imprint. When you're a cleave unit, a cleave player, if you don't have a Watch Ashuri built to speed contest, you're in trouble. You need your Watch Ashuri's built because the speed imprint that he has for a cleave team is invaluable. You need it. Cecilia, again, with how many debuffs there are in this game, and effectiveness not being as effectiveness being better and effort not being as good, immunity is just so stinking powerful. Cecilia's still a really, really amazing knight. Very, very powerful pick. Rella Light, fallen from grace a lot. She's still very powerful, but requires a lot more setup. People are going for those tankier Ruels with immunity that are just there for that initial turn one. Still a really good support early on in the game because you can't just kill the DPS or he just comes back. But late game has lost a lot of value, right? So she used to be a unit that would almost go into highly contested and has fallen to just a really strong unit, right? So kind of weird. Kise, if you build her right, she's just disgusting. She's able to kill units with buffs. She's able to output so much damage. She's able to stealth. She's able to reset. She just does too much. And she's able to easily kill Brewster and tank teams like they're nothing. In a cleave team, you're easily able to do a bunch of damage and lap the opponent and set up into an S2. Such a great unit. Kayron has fallen a lot from grace as well. Could almost go to just like a good pick. Still a really solid cleave counter, but with Cerise there, it's kind of hard for him to thrive. Still really good when you need an AoE damage dealer. I still use mine when I need a good AoE damage dealer, and Cerise is not on the board. I do still pick my Kayron, and he still does his job really, really well. With counter Kayron, also probably the better build at this point, being counter Kayron. Still a really good cleave unit, or not cleave unit, anti-cleave unit, and still being a really good AoE unit though. Crescent Moon Rin, very surprisingly strong just because she's able to speed contest, able to set up immunity early, able to strip buffs, and with RNL, she's just able to cycle so much, you can essentially have immunity almost up every single turn. Because of how fast she cycles and because how fast she is, your team will pretty much always have immunity. Doris, absolutely destroying dark units. If they have a dark unit, they're in trouble because you're gonna have a lot of trouble killing her. Her S3 being a full heal is absolutely bonkers and pushing a unit up. The S2 giving a defense buff and an increased healing is just really, really solid. One of the better healing supports out there, even though healing supports are not doing as good. Alright, so now on to counter picks. This is essentially units you basically just pick for countering. Elena, really good against cleave, really, really good against AoE and control. So if you're fighting control, if you're fighting cleave, You probably want to pick your Elena, but does require to have really high effectiveness to make the most use out of her. F Maya, really good against debuffs. Pretty good overall against squishier teams as well because it's hard for them to kill her, but she does a surprising amount of damage. So really good, again, really good against control, but also very powerful against very squishy teams if they're not able to kill her properly. Momo, still the best free-to-play anti-control unit in the game. Ruana there for those pesky bromans that still pop up every once in a while, and mostly for Seaside, and for Lilius, because Lilius, again, is really, really popular, and for Cerise. So if you see Cerise, Lilius, you might want to consider picking up your Ruana because that's two units that do dual attacks. And that can go a long way in fighting those units. DJ Basar, really good against Cerise. So if you're scared of Cerise, build their DJ if you have them. Also really good overall against Cleave. Or not Cleave, my bad, against Control. Able to push up with the S3. Just very powerful overall. Katie's, again, similar idea. Really good against control. That's basically what she's there for. Same with Ray. But the thing about Ray is the immunity is extra good against units like Cerise, and with Efres being bad later in the fight, having immunity is invaluable. It really does protect you against debuffs better than all these other units are going to be protecting you with. Viseria, kind of an option if you don't have Basar. Basar still being better, or if you want to double up on your unable to be buffed. The reliability doesn't make her as good, but she's still able to put in some work if she does get to debuffs. Celine, still the best Oxlots counter, so people still like her because against Cerise, Oxlots is pretty scary. So it's still nice to have a Celine in there and still really solid. Adley, Chadley, this unit people underestimate so much what he can do. One of the best anti-cleave units because if they're hitting the rest of your team, your CR are pushing up, you're hitting them with that AoE, resetting cooldowns, GG, no re. Really good unit, really good anti-cleaving. I'm shocked how well he actually does. Holiday Yufin, almost want to put her at a top pick, but she's still really, really good for anti-control. And just even sometimes anti-cleave since she's able to dodge that first hit against like a Faithless Litica, but particularly for anti-control, able to cleanse and then able to do a lot of AoE. So if they're playing control with like an aggressive control comp with Cerise and Spectres and Ibria, she actually does really, really well because she's able to cleanse all Cerise's debuffs and actually be able to reach that Spectre Tenebria. Assassin Sid, still the best speed contester if there's no guiding light. So if there's no guiding light, he's still the best. Counters Tomoka, counters for F Flurry, counters a lot of units that are speedy because he's just able to take them out of the fight or just push them back immensely. Now down to the strong picks. So we're gonna be talking a lot less about the units down here as we go down, because they just don't see that much play, and I don't run into them as often, but they are still quite powerful. So Ken being a really, really powerful bruiser, a fire bruiser. Robbie's still outshining Ken, but Ken still being able to put work. A little bit not the best for him because of Cerise and a lot of water units floating around. Mostly Cerise and Seaside, right? But they're still very, very powerful. And a lot of the times, because he scales off of health, it's not the best for him right now. Iseria, still amazing, especially if you're able to combo her off properly with S2 with like an L Crom, but has lost a little bit of favor because she's more easily locked down by a lot of units in the meta. And the other thing is that she's going to be dying a little bit faster because there are a lot more DPS units. There are a lot more cleaves. Still really good units with the S2 and the S3 and the S1 and the Bruiser build. Still really, really cool. And I really want to play around with it. But not as strong as she was before. General Purgus, not really a counter pick anymore. Because Cerise does hurt him a lot. And Oxlots can dodge him pretty well. But still a really good solid unit overall. He's able to provide a lot of push up. And with stealth units like Akali and Guiding Light Cerise and Guiding Light Landy, he's able to push up the team and do a lot of work, and the stun is still really annoying, and he's also able to do an attack buff. So still a very, very solid option. Tene, again, with immunity being so prevalent, she has lost a little bit of favor, but it's still very, very powerful. Still one of the best aggressive control units. If you're playing aggro control and you're trying to kill your opponent and you have a Basar and you have a Broman and you have ways to strip and reach the opponent, Tene will be doing a ton of work. The reason why she's not seeing as much play now is because of how prevalent counters to control are right now because of Cerise. So because of Cerise, there's a lot more counters to Tena floating around in the comms, so she's not doing as hot as she used to. Crimson Armin, oh man, that S3 is still so annoying. The ability to just mitigate and be one knight that does all mitigation is still really nice, especially because now knights are wanting to run Bastion, are wanting to run, like with Ross, with Lilia's wanting to run Holy Sacrifice. There's still, knights don't want to use Aurea's Adamant Shield as often, and Crimson Armin is able to just fill that role and apply that super big defensive pressure if they're not banning her. Emil Sigrid could actually go up. The only reason it's she feels like people opt for her more as like a counter pick than like as a main option. Actually, a really strong unit though. I could see her in the future going up to like counter or even higher. I actually think she's doing really, really good right now. She's in a really good space right now because she does really good against Fawn Cecilia, really good against other comps. And if they're banning Athletica, they're banning or all these other units, and you're able to pick up Emil Sigrid, she does a lot of work, right? With the S3 being able to push back. Not as reliable as a Faithless Lidica, but still very powerful. Mursa, amazing counter pick against Cleave. A little bit more reliant on RNG versus some of the other ones, but still does really, really good. And a good Mursa can make you ruin your day. The other thing is she has an amazing speed imprint. So if you're trying to speed contest with like an ACID, but you're worried that you won't be able to outspeed with said unit, and you also want to have another counter to cleave or to aggro comps, you can pick Mursa since she gives that speed imprint, and that way you effectively are able to counter the cleave. So very, very powerful there. Charlotte does surprising amount of damage, just takes a little bit to set up. And that's a big problem. Takes a little bit too long to set up, and CSAT still being a huge counter to her and just kind of destroying her there. Sinful Angelica being really, really annoying. I actually really, really hate going against a good Sinful Angelica team because they usually will stack up on dual attacks with like a Spectre Tenebria, a Ras, and a Cerise, and then like a Stene or a Riolet, and it just gets really, really annoying. Or even a Landy, right, on Guiding Light. And it's just so many dual attacks, and the fact that she gives speed buff and attack buff is still really, really good. If you can make her work and build a team around her, she's really good. Green Harmon, really powerful tank, still has really good passive, does a lot for your team, and is able to also mess up the team a lot, right? So very, very good in that aspect. Ekali, one of my favorite speed contesters against lower speed tiers, right? So against top model Luluka, you can really punish a top model Luluka pick if you have an Akali because it just applies so much pressure that they're going to die to the Akali. And some people have insanely fast Akalis and are able to speed contest with her, even like the cleave teams, right? So I still like to pick her against cleave teams, even though mine's not the fastest. Um, but again, very, very sorry that it's like zooming out and in. Very, very powerful pick right there. Benevolent Broman has fallen off a little bit of favor just because there are so many counters to control running around right now, and there are so many speed contesters. Like everything's fast and everything is anti-control. So definitely not his best meta, which is why he's fallen off a lot. But still, if you get that S3 off, it's just nuts. Emo Ken, surprisingly, is still really good with T Cern being around so much. He does a really good job against stopping T Cern and stopping certain teams if he's able to get his counters off, right? So very, very strong in the right situation. And even if it's not in the right situation, he still has such a good kit. He's like one buff away from being meta. But right now, still a very solid option, especially for anti-T Cern and for setting up and for countering and doing some Brewster stuff against certain cleave teams. Judgment Kise is still very powerful for Cleave. Cleavers are not going for her as often because they like to use Cerise instead, so they're not countered by Cerise. So she's still a really good damage dealer that you're able to use in Cleave. Moonlight Aramintia fallen off a lot, again, because of how prevalent immunity and anti-control units are in this current meta. And with how many speed contesters there are, you can't just raw pick her like you used to against a tank team because people have really good speed contesters. A Sits, a Collies, Speed Riley, Tomoka, F. Flurry, Rose. There are so many fast units right now that she's not going to be able to get her S3 off as reliably. Troublemaker CrossFit makes any unit as they said Bologna, but doesn't bring much more to the table. Still really annoying, still really good support. I actually really hate going against him. He's pretty annoying there. Bildred, one of the best speed imprint for speed contesting. If you're a cleave player and someone is trying to speed contest you extremely hard and they're trying to go super fast, and you pick up Bildred, GG for them, and he's still a really solid cleaver too. So solid cleaver with speed imprint makes it really hard for you as a cleave player to get outsped. Chu, really good against Robbie. The new changes to Frenzy have hurt her because she does scale off of her health. So Frenzy changes have hurt her quite a bit, but she's still a very powerful unit. She's still able to set up the anti-crit, she's still able to do damage, she's still able to one-shot with S2. but just not as powerful anymore. Just an average bruiser that you can use that does the job well. All right, now let's move on to the niche tier. Again, these are units that need very specific team compositions they're fighting against, or very specific team comps you're putting them in. Mortalix feels too slow to set up, and you would need to go against a full tank team and still have units like Basar to help you out. So he still needs units to help him strip because Fallen Cecilia is not going to let him do that. And the fact that he's Earth makes him really susceptible to just getting robbed. If you're able to set up with him, you're going to be doing really well that fight, but it's just an insane amount of setup. Flan, just a solid option for Cleve, but the thing is that you are giving up a slot for an Athletica, a Cerise, any other CR pusher. You're giving up that slot for Flan, which can be extremely, extremely dangerous. There are scenarios where she will be able to shine if you're able to get like a Basar, her, and some like a two really high DPS units that are quite fast, like a fast RB, a fast Esurin, or like an Oxlots, then you should be okay, right? It just sometimes feel awkward to put in there, and you're giving up certain units to be able to put her in. But there's definitely scenarios. We saw YDCV actually have pretty good success with her against Champ C. So can actually make her good, but very very hard to do. Violet only good against all water teams, and besides that, doesn't is not really gonna be doing that much. Mui needs a full team to go with her to follow up after her S3 and her S2. If you're able to get that setup with her S3 being able to strip, attack buff into a CDOM, into a control cleave, she does really well. So control cleave, actually kind of a core unit. So niche, again, I don't want you guys to feel like these units are completely bad. Niche just means that they need very specific setups. And cleave control is a really good setup for Mui. There's a guy with a speed Mui and it's super annoying, and he's doing extremely well. Destina, only really there for very, very tank teams to counter control. But again, with Ephraim not being as good, Destina has fallen off a little bit. You want to just go the full counter Stella Harpa build and just pray for some RNG counterattacks and just be very annoying. So again, with the fall of tank teams, not as good, but still really good at keeping your team topped off. Mid Chloe kind of goes as a last pick support. So if you're able to pick a team with a lot of DPSs, some knights, right? So a very aggressive team, and you need a last slot support that also gives attack buff, you can slot in Make Chloe and she'll do really, really well. Dark Corvus, not as good as he was because, like, A, there's not as many tank teams running around, and B, effectiveness changes. Most tanks have a way to deal with Dark Corvus now. So all these provokes and all these different things of stopping Dark Corvus, he's not really going to be seeing as much play unless you're going against a tank team that doesn't have any form of provoke, any form of control, like nothing. You'd have to go against a full tank team with like no CC. Or with like you have a full team of supports that can actually support him and they let him through, right? So very, very hard to actually get Dark Corvus to work with the current meta. But if you're able to, it's still pretty annoying and still really cool to watch. Charles, it's just way too RNG, and there's not that many scenarios now where I'm like, yeah, I really wish there was a Charles right here. Just doesn't do a lot right now. Still can pop off against buff teams and slower teams with the S2 into strip and to set up attack buff, so still has setup there. Specimen says, again, it needs a setup with like Mui or like stunners that you're not going to be getting in RTA as often as you would like, so very unlikely that you'll see a lot from him. Yuna, still a really cool unit. If you set her up with like a Sid, can do some really cool stuff. Or even with like a Cerise, right? Because the speed buff is really, really nice. But again, there's just a lot of different units that do it, and the gear requirements are insane. And you need units that can actually utilize the speed buff and the attack buff very, very early. So you will need extremely fast units, and you're most likely not going to have that. Kitty Cat Clarissa, really good against control because she has such high FRS. But again, as I mentioned, with FRS being so doo-doo, not as good, right? Still able to strip, still able to do some cool stuff, still able to dual attack, right? So I could see her maybe coming up a little bit in the future against certain teams with dual attacks being so popular. But there's so many other units that dual attack and that cleanse that it just feels like she's not doing as great as she used to. Dami, if you need a stunner, she's there for you, right? If you really want to use Specimen Says, you can actually use her there. Sid, as mentioned, if you have a speed buffer, Sid actually does a surprising amount of damage. With Yuna, Sid can actually take out a unit outright, but it requires insane gear, insane requirements, and for them to let your Sinful Angelica or your Yuna through, and for your Sid to outspeed them. Ascat, 15% evasion is still really annoying. If you want to cheese your opponent with Rylet and Ascat, or Rylet and Mirsa Ascat, you still can, and it'll still catch some people off guard. Maya, surprisingly annoying. I really didn't like going against Maya because she's able to AoE provoke and set up increased defense. The only thing is she wants to go fast, but usually people have immunity. And her base speed is not that high. So they'll be able to either set up immunity or have immunity set to start with. So unless your Maya is dummy fast, she's not going to be doing much. And then you have to pray that they don't have immunity set, right? So it's kind of a gamble that you take. But if you're able to get it off, it's really nice with the increased defense, the attack break, and the provoke. If you get the skill off, you're in a really good spot. But again, it's very unlikely that you will. Blaze Dingo has fallen off a lot from Grace. Again, speed contesters are everywhere, control is everywhere, and it's really easy to stop a Blango cleave at this point. And the S1 being RNG a little bit doesn't help too much because you may hit the wrong target and then he doesn't kill the unit versus another cleaver could have or could have applied debuff. So kind of has fallen off, but still a really good option for cleaving. Ran very RNG, very annoying if you actually get off the skill, but overall not really doing a lot. If you RNG your way out, and if you love RNG, you can definitely make her work with certain aggro teams because she's actually quite fast. So you're able to set up your buffs early on, and you get insane buffs. It could be really cool. Watch a Shuri. It's a speed imprint. If you don't have or regular Shuri, my bad. Speed imprint does a lot of damage. So if you're someone that wants a cleave player that wants to outspeed and do a lot of damage, he can actually work pretty well. Shooting Star Arcades needs to have a unit that she gives immortality to that will do well, and your opponent cannot have a stripper. If you have a stripper, or if you don't have a unit to give immortality to that can pop off, she doesn't do anything. So pretty self-explanatory there. Bloodbath Karen, another option for cleave, not as powerful as she used to be. Haven't seen any counter BBK, but still does good in your traditional team composition as a cleaver, so it's an option for you there. Siren, there are other better speed imprinters, so unless you're really lacking in speed imprints, there's another speed imprint for you. Pearl, again, there's too many counters to control. Immunity is everywhere. She's not getting to do her job properly. Fire, being Earth also hurts her against units like Lilius. And the fact that she doesn't do anything besides CC with the S2 really hurts her. Ian, basically an Athletica replacement. Can also come off with Athletica. Can actually pop off here and there, and I have seen him pop off, but it's kind of like why pick him over other units. It's just a fun, cool unit. If you don't have Athletica, definitely, by all means, you can definitely use him. Wanda, anti-Rylet, but you have to hope that it's faster and that the Rylet is not on a immunity lifesteal build. You are not going to one-shot a Rylet in a tank team with immunity with in a tank like with automate Aureus, right? So has fallen off quite a bit. It still does really good against Rylet, but with Rylet also being slower now and tankier, you're not gonna be able to kill him. Judith, really good if you're trying to outspeed. If you're trying to speed contest and you just want to slap on someone to scare the opponent, Judith can definitely get you turn one. Celeste, she could actually go up to a strong pick. Her speed imprint is amazing. The fact that she can hit AoE is amazing. The fact that she pushes back is amazing. She's a really solid speed contester with a speed imprint. But the thing about it is that's mostly what she's doing is speed contesting, which does happen a lot, right? So it's the same thing with Wonder, Silk, Litica. I'm going to pair them all together. They are speed contesters that can definitely take a unit out of the game like this, but they rely on RNG and rely on you outspeeding them. Celeste does have the speed imprint over Wonder, Silk, and Litica, but they don't do much after they speed interrupt, and they're not guaranteed to get it. And with Litica and Wonder Silk, they're only able to hit one target, and usually that is enough. So if you need a speed contester, they do really well at that, at speed contesting. But there are other speed contesters, and there's still things like what's that new thing? Like Guiding Light. So Cerise and Athletica could be on Guiding Light, and then you're not getting anything. And they could be running T-Cern, and Please do. And because they're single target damage, they're not going to be hitting things like Spectres and Uvia. Now, as far as the Outclass, these are units that there's units that just do their job up better. Luna is a bruiser that there are millions of other bruisers that do her job up better. Ervalen is just a cleave unit that is not going to be seeing almost any playing cleave. A, because tanks are almost gone. B, because there's other better single target damage dealer like Tomoka, like what's that other one? Watch a Shuri. Watch a Shuri just does better than what he does, right? So even just Watch a Shuri just does better. So even a 4-star does better. Granted, it's an ML 4-star. Sedom just does already one-shots. Spectre T already just one-shots. Tywin, really cool in some scenarios. Can work similar to Flan, but unlike Flan, he hits the opponent, which is surprisingly worse than Flan in RTA. Also requires Soul to work properly. Still a okay option. Can still use him here and there. Tama, you would need Tamaiseri to make this work, and it's just never going to happen. Armentia just really doesn't do much. She's like a control unit that doesn't really control well, and the burns just don't do enough damage to justify doing it. Sermia, again, there's just better single target damage dealers in the game. I just don't see her seeing any play. Same thing with Elfil. I don't see you picking her to one-shot someone. I just don't see it. Especially like in control and the 15% RNG for Elfil. It's just too much. Maybe Alpha could go up in the future. Not gonna lie. Melissa, there are so many things that kill Rylan now. Speed Melissa, also there's so many speed contesters that are scary for her. So not as good as she used to be. Ludwig, way too much setup required. You are most likely never going to get the setup for Ludwig. And if you do, congratulations. That's very, very good. But it's just very, very hard to actually get him to do it. And then the AoE damage is not even that crazy. Says, again, same thing. Highly unlikely that you get him to go first. Highly unlikely to get him to one-shot a unit. Highly unlikely. Like, there's a lot of unlikelies that it's just better to use another cleave unit. Sigrid, there's better things to deal with Arbiter Villager now. Tomoka exists. I'm gonna pair up Glenn and Sigrid at this point. Tomoka exists. Sinful Angelica exists. You can just Athletica, T-Surin. People don't really deal with Arbiter Villager with units like Sigrid and Glenn anymore. But if you don't have any way and you're a cleave player and you are struggling, they are there for you. So you can definitely still use them. Pavel, I mentioned in the beginning, can be used in a cleave, and there are scenarios to speed contest as well with Pavel, but the gear requirements are just insane for a speed contester. So it's kind of like, that's rough. Bologna, there's just better defense breakers. Cowrick, I could actually see in the future, but it's just there's better speed contesters that are easier to build and can do more. I could see him in the future coming up because this meta is so fast and so aggressive, and he's able to reset cooldown very early on in the fight. But the lack of survivability really, really hurts him because he doesn't have the damage to just instantly delete any unit unless it's like a Tomoka. So he can still counter Tomoka, which is good, but it requires good gear, high speed, and then he most likely will be one shot himself. So I could definitely see him being used in the future, but right now there's just other speed contesters that do the job better. Like, why use him when you can just use Acid? Chloe, really good single target damage, but besides that, is not really doing much right now. Ball, kind of cool, looks cool, has really, really annoying debuffs, but again, there's better debuffers and a lot of immunity and kind of immunity. Fiend, same thing as Ervalin, there's better single target damage dealers. Baiken, there's better CR pushers, but she is kind of unique in the fact that she can actually do damage when she CR pushes. I could actually see Baiken going up in the future. If I had to be completely honest with y'all, I could honestly see Baiken going up in the niche tier. Because if you build her fast enough against a slower team and you're doing an aggro team yourself, this could be really, really good for you if you're able to get her S2 off. Lilibet, there's just so many better units than Lilibet for dealing with RB. General Purgus, AoE is nice, but he's too slow, and there's so many ways to deal with him. And AoE against Emil Crawl will just kill you. C-Merc, still a really good cleaver, but there's just other options you can use instead of Celestia Mercedes. We did see YDCB use her, and it was pretty hype. I really enjoyed watching it, but overall, it's just, she's a little bit slow, so you do need to have her with Oxlots, essentially. Kisuna can be really good at scenarios, certain scenarios. Solid support, but again, there's just better support. Same thing with CrossFit, like what you saying with Fallen Cecilia. Angelica, beefy, annoying, can be really good early on, but doesn't really do much, doesn't cleanse. Clarissa, there's just better damage dealer. Broman, there's just better strippers. Ricker is kind of cool, S2, but the cooldowns are really dumb and really high, and doesn't bring much to the table besides one stun every like 4 turns and like one strip. He doesn't do a lot, right? Compared to all these other units. Lots, again, healer can push up, but like, are you really gonna use him? And Rusid, there are just a lot of other units that do what he does, except that he does get the speed buff with Sid, and there's a really cool interaction. Ben, kind of like Charon, can't do much against Cerise. Really nice AoE attack though. If he gets a specialty change, I could see him being insane. And then last, oh, why is this guy here? What the heck? Gunther should be here. So I completely missed Gunther. He should be up here. So Gunther, I am sorry about that, and I will tag that for sure. But Gunther is a niche unit. He can definitely go in the niche category just because he can pair off so well with Lilias and kills Ryler very well. But all right, going back to the function I use, I'm gonna go back through this because there's some units here that I completely messed up on. All right, so far I'm not seeing anything like all these units just easily get outclassed, and there's 0 scenarios where I would see them being used. Yeah. Okay, so that was the only one. That was odd. I must have missed it when I was putting the 3-star, 4 stars. But okay, that is going to be all for this tier list. I hope y'all enjoyed, and I will see y'all next time. Again, final thoughts. Very early into the season, things are going to change. The top parts are very well set up. We know what's good, we know what's not, and we'll see as we progress what happens in the meta. But that's all I have for you guys today, and I will see y'all next time. Peace.